Welcome everyone to Next Generation Eco Heroes Roundtable and live stream presentation organized as part of the 17th Annual Planet Focus Environmental Film Festival. Hello to everyone watching online and at school today. Little wave. I'm Adria Vasil and I'm your moderator today. I am the author of the Ecoholic book series. I've also been writing a column called Ecoholic for Toronto's Now magazine for the last 12 years. And we are very excited today to have joining us as part of the 2016 Planet Focus Canadian Eco Hero Award recipient, Dr. David Suzuki. He's gathered here today with us, along with these 10 amazing environmental leaders, all under the age of 25. Now, David Suzuki is the co-founder, in case you didn't know, of the David Suzuki Foundation. He is an award-winning scientist, environmentalist, and broadcaster. He is renowned for his radio and television programs, including The Nature of Things, which I'm sure many of you have seen, that explain the complexities of natural sciences in a compelling, easily understandable way. He is the author of 52 books, amazing, the most recent of which is called Letters to My Grandchildren. He is Canada's most well-known, respected, and influential environmentalist, and we are so honored to have him here with us today. Thank you so much, David.
My honor. These are the real eco-heroes, I think.
We are really excited to have all of you participants that have been chosen through a very competitive process. So congratulations on being here to all of you. We are so pleased that you could each join us, and we're looking forward to meeting each and every single one of you individually. We're going to take turns going around the table. I will briefly introduce each of you and your work. Then you'll have a chance to ask Dr. Suzuki a question. He'll get a chance to answer it. We'll give him that chance, and then we can open it up to a little bit of group discussion for each question. I'll keep us on track as best I can to end at 3 p.m. today. Okay, so our first participant and first eco-hero is Arani Kumarangan. She is a grade 11 student at Mark Gardner's CI and has been heavily involved in environmental rights since grade 7. In grade 7, she joined Ontario Nature's Youth Council and got the opportunity to intern at Ontario Nature as the Youth Pollinator Conservation Intern. Most of her work pertains to advocacy and educating the public about Ontario's wild and natural pollinators and advocating for the strengthening of Ontario's Bill of Environmental Rights. In addition to this, Arani recently gave a presentation to the TDSB teachers about a possible pollinator-focused curriculum that they could add to their classroom. Arani's work doesn't stop with making change, but also she's involved in getting citizens involved. Her current goal is to get 4 more cities involved in the Bee City program, to continue to learn from others, and to inspire some people of her own to take action to protect their communities. Your question, please.
Okay, so my question to you, Dr. David Suzuki, is how did you manage to get people that possibly don't care as much about the environment to care and take action?
Well, first of all, I think that I've been very fortunate in being associated with a series program like The Nature of Things. And really the nature of things and all of the people that go into producing the program week after week gave me a platform to be there. And I think because of the great reputation of The Nature of Things, it gave me a credibility with the public. And certainly I learned from being involved in The Nature of Things a deeper understanding of what the environmental issues were really about. So we always try to provide some kind of link to the viewer so that it's not just, looking at something that's not connected to my life. And I think people respond to something that is going to affect them, either their health or something that they find really interesting. And that gives you the beginning then of a dialogue, I hope. And I've been very, very successful or fortunate at having that opportunity. The other thing I think people should know is we're very lucky to have the CBC. The CBC is every Canadian pays for it with their taxes. And whenever I go to the United States, it's like a desert down there in terms of programming that is interesting. So I feel I've been very lucky to have good people and a good network and going out and explaining things in a way that the public responds to.
Thank you so much.
Did you come to our pollination event last night?
I know I didn't. I
Oh,
was
you
studying
would have
for
loved
math.
it.
but I
You would
just-
have loved it. But I congratulate you on choosing pollination because, again, that's an interesting thing. Most people kind of know pollination.
Yeah.
They don't realize that if all the pollinators on the planet disappeared, so would we.
Yeah.
Terrestrial ecosystems would collapse.
Yeah, I've also been fortunate to get to reach out to people, which I think is really important, about not just saving the honeybees, but our wild natural pollinators, such as the rusty patched bumblebee, which I don't think a lot of people realize. And I get to teach people about how there are other pollinators other than the bees, such as the beetles and the birds, which are also great pollinators.
Bats and mice.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. But one of the students was there last night, and he's been setting bee traps all over the city. He didn't talk last night, but I talked to him. And there are dozens of species of bees in the city of Toronto. I was astounded at the biodiversity among bees.
Now, you were asking about whether people have had difficulty communicating, or getting other people on board that may not care about environmental issues. Does anyone have any kind of ideas here to how that's worked for you, trying to convince other people that might not care about things you care about on board?
I can answer that from the perspective of the artist. I guess I run an environmental issues theater company. And I guess one of our most successful things recently was thinking about how do we get people to think about things that they love. And there was this great idea from a professor called Dan Dolderman here at UT, and he tries to convince people to think about things that they love. And if they love anything, then they should care about protecting those things. And I think it's those subtle perspective changes. If we can find ways to do those things about pollinators or whatever issues that we care about, GMOs, then I think that's so substantial. It's those, and sometimes small turns of phrases are so helpful. Protectors, not protesters, for example. It's such a beautiful phrase. So for me, I think it's those sort of small, significant things.
Anyone else?
Well, let me just say, seeing you as an Asian Canadian like me, one of the things I'm aware of is when, we're a country of immigrants. When immigrants, like my grandparents came here between 1902 and 1906, way back, they were very poor, very uneducated. They came to Canada for opportunity. And they taught my parents, you got to work hard and get security, get an education. How do we get them, new immigrants who've come here for all kinds of reasons, interested in the environment? We now have almost 30,000 Syrians that have come here for horrifying reasons why they've left their country. They're concerned about other things in the environment. How do we, and I ask everybody this, how do we get new immigrants and children of new immigrants here concerned?
I think that everybody on a personal note has a will and a drive to do good for our environment and for other people. Just a lot of people don't realize that they have the power to make a difference. And especially when looking at new immigrants, refugees, a lot of them are in very helpless situations where they may not feel empowered to make a difference. But it's bringing the issues down to a personal level where they realize that every issue that they may be passionate about can affect them on a deeper level. And realizing that we can empower people of all backgrounds, whether it be ethnicity or financial status, to make a difference and to stand up for what they believe in.
Something else that I've found to be very powerful, and I've heard you communicate that before, is to not necessarily bring in politics or whatnot, but just to say that, if we can't have clean air, we can't survive. If we can't have clean water, we can't survive. So we all have a need to protect that, to protect our water, because we depend on it for our own survival.
Exactly. We need to put things into perspective because people see numbers on charts, but they don't necessarily understand how that affects us every day and how that will affect our futures. So we need to really help people understand what these numbers on charts mean and how that's going to affect our children and our children's children.
Can you believe this? These are youth.
We're so
Right
grateful.
on.
We're so grateful that you're allowed to exist. You're right in the future, thank God. Now, our next participant, an eco-hero, next generation, is Hannah Alper. Hannah Alper launched her blog, callmehannah.ca, at 9 years old to share her growing concern for environmental issues and show that small, everyday actions can lead to big change. She has since emerged as an impassioned public speaker and has shared her optimism on at We Day and TEDx stages. Engaging her audience on social media, Hannah uses her voice to motivate and empower people of all ages to identify their passion and to take action for a better world. Her journey as a youth activist shows that when it comes to leading social change, there's no such thing as too young. Now, what is your question now?
Yeah, so this is a two-part question. And as I told you, your daughter Severn is a really big role model for me and was my first role model, and really made me realize how important it is for young people to find positive role models, because I really do think that that's such an important thing. I know that you were her first role model. Does being a father make you a better activist, or does being an activist make you a better father? And what is the biggest thing that you taught her, and what is the biggest thing that she has taught you?
Wow, how many hours do we have on this? Yes, well, I certainly think being a father, certainly it drives, and now being a grandfather is what drives me with the passion that I have. I think of the children, who are brought into the world and are so innocent and so open to loving the world that they're brought into. And when I see what we adults are doing and have done to it, it gives me a real drive to try to work towards making it a better world for them. We've made a mess. And as I say, my generation, the boomers that followed, we partied as if there was no tomorrow. We didn't think much about the consequences of what we were doing. But I think every parent has got to be thinking, longer term, and that's what makes you realize, my gosh, the world is changing. So being a father sharpens my concern about the environment and the need to act. Now, does being an activist help me be a parent? One of my great, not regrets, but one thing that gives me discomfort is that I was away a lot. And even when I was home, there were times when I'd be writing a book. 50 books is a lot of books. I didn't give my children the attention they needed. Fortunately, I was married twice, and both women were fantastic moms. And so really, Severn's mother was her role model, her mentor in many, many ways. And I'm grateful to my wife that she was able to provide that leadership and that need when I was away. What was the second part of your question?
Just what's the biggest thing that she's taught you, and what's the biggest thing that you have taught her?
Well, I thought I'd tell you a couple of stories about what she's taught me. When I was 9, after World War II ended, we moved. I was 9 years old. We moved to a town in Ontario called Leamington. And Leamington is close to Detroit. And Dad took me and my sisters to the Detroit Zoo. And for me at that time, that was one of the great experiences of my life. I was astounded at the diversity of life on Earth. I mean, it was just inspirational. So when Severn was around 10 or 8, and I took her to the Toronto Zoo, and I was so excited because I remembered the impact it had on me. And yet, at every exhibit we went to, her first question was, "Daddy, are there many left?" So here she was at 10 years old, and she already knew about extinction, and it really worried her. And, aside from the fact that I knew she made me realize that her world is changing so much, I also became very aware that I was going into such dark places in terms of the environment. And I didn't want her to feel overwhelmed by it. So I've always tried to put a more positive note on the problems that we face. The second thing was when she was even younger, I had gone into a place called the Kutsumateen Valley where grizzly bears came down in the spring to feed. And we were doing a film on grizzlies. And after we had finished filming, we were coming out on a sailboat. And I said, Sav, there's a killer whale. And it was right up beside the boat. And when she came up and looked, it dove. And so, of course, we're watching and watching, trying to see where it would come. And then finally I said, Sav, there it is. Look at that. And expecting her to go, woo, and all that. And she, no sound. And I looked down at her. I said, what's wrong? And she was crying. I said, what's the matter? She said, look how far it went on one breath of air. And we keep them in these tiny puddles at the aquarium. So here she was, 7 years old, and she already knew and understood that an animal like that is made to be out in the wild and free to swim in the ocean. And it pained her. That was a child's observation that was so pure, and that was a really important thing that she taught me, that captive animals, you know, where children look at that and they know that it's not right.
Yeah, definitely. And I've watched a lot of her videos, and you know, I saw that she had cried in her bed some nights because she was afraid of animal extinction, and she wanted to help the animals.
Yes.
And you know, she did such small things when she was a child. You know, she carried around a wagon of stuffed animals, going around asking people to help the animals. And I think that, you know, even something like that, when I was 9 years old, I watched that video, and that just inspired me because I saw that little things could add up to make a big difference. And you know, like your Severn was just so knowledgeable about that, and you know, any person can be. And I mean, you know, my parents and so many parents are so supportive of it. And you know, like you said, my parents have definitely shown me a lot of the negative stuff happening in the world, but they always remind me of all of the positive things happening, which I think is really great.
Exactly, exactly. Interesting. I talked about this last night. When I was a boy, my mother made me a net out of cheesecloth, and my dad made a hoop on a handle, and so I had a butterfly net. And I was an avid insect collector, and I loved beetles. And with my children, I wanted them all to want to collect insects. And they love insects, but they didn't want to kill them. So it's a very, you know, a generational shift in our attitude. I grew up at a time when, and I see there might be some older people, at least one whiter, when we drove out in the country with a car, you'd have to stop every 10 or 15 minutes to clean the windshield because it would be plastered with insects. Now you can drive, you know, on the 401 at high speeds, and you know, you may hit 1 or 2 insects, but nothing like, we've really deprived the planet of insects through the spreading of pesticides. So the world is very, very different. And my young children sort of, Dad, you don't want to kill those insects.
Yeah.
It's a greater respect for life on Earth.
Yeah, and I think I can say this on behalf of all the panelists. I think that our generation really does care about making a difference, and we really do know that young people can make a difference and that we care. And we have researched a lot. I mean, there are so many organizations and resources out there, and the internet has really helped us learn about different issues all around the world. But, you know, like you said, you know, if your grandchildren say, you know, don't kill the insects, I think that, like you said, that's really a shift in generations. But I think that in a lot of ways it's a really good shift because, you know, we're actually caring about different issues.
Absolutely.
And Hannah, you're a perfect example of that. At just 13, you're one of the youngest eco-heroes here today, so keep kicking butt. And we're so glad that you were inspired by Dr. Suzuki and his daughter. It's amazing. Yeah. Our next eco-hero, next generation, is Jonah Bryson. Born and raised in southern France, he fell in love with exploring the Mediterranean Sea and felt deeply connected to the underwater world. At the age of just 12, he decided to undertake his first feature film, which is amazing, A Sweet Spot in Time. This co-production with undersea explorer and producer Fabien Cousteau features world-renowned features world-renowned personalities including Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield, social media phenomenon Prince E, and National Geographic oceanographer Sylvia Earle. This environmental film is a call to action for the people of today, to fix the mistakes of humanity's past and save the future of tomorrow's children. It is set for release in 2017, so keep your eyes out for A Sweet Spot in Time. Now, after receiving an environmental filmmaking award sponsored by the Prince of Monaco II, only at the age of 14, he co-directed The Flight of Bala with Canadian sharkwater director Rob Stewart. It was released by the Huffington Post with the support of National Geographic and the Globe and Mail. Now, following the recent release of the film, he was actually called a whiz kid at the forefront of filmmaking in service of the preservation of the planet by National Geographic. He's also, by the way, a certified scuba diver and serves as the North American director of Ocean Ark Alliance, a group composed of Emmy and Oscar award-winning filmmakers using film as a tool to protect the world's oceans. By the way, OAA's work is featured on Netflix, the BBC, and Leonardo DiCaprio's Before the Flood, all over the place. As well as the nature things.
Oh.
Yes. In addition, he's a partner of Mission Blue and has served as a judge for the UN and the IUCN's global competitions. Pretty amazing. As a 16-year-old who is deeply concerned about his future, he always tries to find new ways to help protect the environment and the world we depend on for survival, and using his passion as well for entertainment. Okay. So I'm going to ask you all, before we go to Jonah, to just make sure you're speaking loudly so that the audiences at school and live streaming can hear us very clearly. Jonah, your question.
Sure. So one big thing I've learned on my journey is this whole issue of how people are being displaced because of climate change. And so what I was wondering is, how do you think different countries should deal with the influx of immigration and shortage of food and water?
Wow, that's a tough one. But, we can't, obviously, we can't just expect countries to accept climate refugees. I mean, there are going to be literally millions and millions of them. And I am told, I don't know enough about the situation, but the whole crisis in Syria is driven by climate change. And, the reality is that we in the rich countries have created the problem in the first place. And we seem perfectly willing to let, the Pacific, many of the Pacific islands that are just very shallow coral atolls, we're going to let them go and not care about it. Well, but we caused the problem. I think we have an enormous responsibility now to provide people, I hope, the ability to stay where they live. Now, with the disappearing islands, there's nothing we can do about that. And there we have to provide alternate places for them to come to. But I think that we've got to pour a huge amount of our money, our wealth, which has come at the expense of the environment. And you have all of these countries paying the price for that. We've got to begin a massive program of foreign aid. The way the Harbour government did it, our aid program was tied to Canadian mining interests. In other words, saying, we'll give you food and aid, but you've got to let our companies come in and mine in your country. This is terrible. Totally self-interested concept of aid. We owe it to the poor countries that are being impacted so heavily. They're the ones that are being impacted the worst. And it's our responsibility. Food, aid, we've got to ante up.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Jonah?
Well, I fully agree with that, because also if we let immigrants keep coming, also gets rid of the urgency of the issue, and meanwhile all these different places are going to disappear. But if we can see that there are people that are really dealing with this issue, then we will feel more of an urgency to try to help them and try to protect the place they live. If we keep letting them come, then those islands will just keep disappearing, every place will just disappear, and then it's over. So I think we definitely need to help a lot of people 100%, but we also need to understand that we need to protect those places because it's their home too, it's where they're from.
Does anyone here have any family that comes from a climate change affected region? Because I mean, pretty much everywhere around the world is affected now. But have you spoken to any family, around the world, or even here in Canada, that feels directly affected by climate change?
Yeah, my friend, he's from Grassy Narrows, and they had mercury poisoning in the water. So this is right in Ontario, and he was displaced because he came to Toronto after he had mercury poisoning. He's only 25, and I remember him. He's swimming in Lake Ontario right at the shore. I'm like, why would you do that? It's so polluted. He's like, well, I already have mercury poisoning, so it doesn't really matter. My life is already cut short, so I know I'm only going to live to 40 at the max. So this is happening. Even 25-year boil water advisories or suicide crises. I think those are all connected to the land and the environment. So that happens right in our backyards, but we don't really think about it. So I know family members and friends that have been displaced that come to urban settings because they can't live where they're living or they don't want to live there anymore. So that's more like local.
It's like Canadian refugees, internal.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
displacement even to reserve land. So like through colonization, that process, that's something that I feel too is like, oh, okay, you get the really crappy land and the river comes out of the pulp mill. That's like where Manitou Rapids, Rain River First Nation. We have the pulp mill, and then all that stuff comes into our water, and that's where the sturgeon spawn as well. So yeah, that's family and friends. That
You know that in Canada, every day there are more than 1,000 boil water alerts. The water is not safe to drink without boiling it, and a preponderance are on First Nations reserves. So, you know, it tells you something is wrong. I flew into a very isolated community in the so-called Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario a couple of weeks ago. Nibinamik is the name of this community. And when I left Thunder Bay, we then flew for 2 hours. And all you saw on both sides of the plane was water. Like, we've got so many lakes, you know, all the way up. And yet, when I landed in Nibinamik and we had a meeting with the town council, we sat at a table and every person was given a bottled water. And I'm going, something doesn't compute here. Like, what kind of a country are we where we have such vast amounts of water, disproportionate amount of water, and yet we don't even trust it in such a distant, remote community? We can't keep going on just using the earth like a garbage can and affecting the most vulnerable among us, the poorest among us. Every one of those bottles of water had to be flown in. You know, you started thinking, holy cow, there's something wrong here.
Well, our next eco-hero is Akeisha, who just was talking about displacement of her friend at Grassy Narrows. Akeisha Footman is 22 years old, and she is of the Martin clan, lives in Toronto right now. Her family roots are in Manitou Rapids, Treaty 3 territory in northwestern Ontario, and Europe. She's a visual artist, storyteller, traditional knowledge carrier, and a proud Indigenous woman. She enjoys dancing, making things, learning about traditional medicines, and supporting youth access to mental health and addiction resources. In her personal time, she's connecting community members to promote Indigenous healing, arts, culture, and education. Akeisha, your question for Mr. Suzuki.
My question for you was, so sometimes when we're talking about environmental rights and these things, oh, how beautiful this water is, so when you go to people, they just don't understand. It's like there's like a veil on connecting that, oh, we're actually made out of this water, oh, we're actually connected to those bees, oh, we're connected to our brothers and sisters from all over the world, oh, we all live on this land, oh, this land has been here since time immemorial. Like, and then in your life experience, in your career, what advice do you have to young people that are going to face those challenges of people that are just going to disregard the Indigenous lands or disregard this information because it doesn't serve almost like this colonial capitalist agenda that we're, through the media, we're almost like brainwashed to believe?
Of course.
So I'm just wondering.
You're being brainwashed in the educational system and the political system, all of that to hold on to certain values. And I think Mr. Harper, when he was Prime Minister, did it very well. He said, we can't afford to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It'll destroy the economy. So what he was saying is the economy comes before the very air that we depend on. The very atmosphere that gives us our weather and climate is not as important as the economy. So, and that's what we're being hammered with all of the time. Your generation is different. The educational system, I believe, has been very effective at getting you more aware of environmental issues. I encounter when I get on an airplane and I get a guy in a suit coming up and saying, "Damn you, Suzuki, I'm really mad at you." And I'm going, "What did I do?" Because my kid is bugging me all the time to turn out the lights and recycle. Yes! It's the kids that are driving it. But I often meet young people that say, "How can I save the world? What can I do to save the world?" My answer is double-barreled. First of all, I say, don't worry about saving the world. The world has been here long before we ever got here as a species, and the world will keep on doing what it always did. So that's not your problem. The question is, how do we protect and maintain the biosphere as a livable thing for animals like us? And I always say, follow your heart. You see, environmentalism is not a profession or a discipline like being a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher or a plumber or a carpenter. Environmentalism is a way of seeing our relationship with the world. There's an understanding that we're a part of this biosphere, the zone of air, water, and land where all life exists, and that we depend on the rest of life here to give us clean air and clean water, and all of our food was once alive, and understanding that. And so I say, follow your heart. Whatever you like to do. If you like to play with cars and want to become a garage mechanic, if you want to be a lawyer or a teacher or whatever, follow your heart. Because everybody has to see the world through that lens. That's the big change, is when we, as a society, understand what our fundamental needs are. So follow your heart. That's what you're going to do with great passion. But do whatever you do through the lens of environmentalism. Does that make sense to you? And I think one of the things, you've raised the issue of colonialism. I've been thinking a lot about our species. You know, as a scientist, I've been very impressed with the way we can use DNA, the genetic material. And we can actually trace the movement of human beings across the planet. Now, virtually every society has their own creation myths, how we got here. Well, I shouldn't call them myths, creation stories. But science also has provided a creation story that goes way back. And it looks like we evolved as a species in Africa 150,000 years ago. So our home was the plains of Africa. But then we began to move, probably because our population grew a bit and we ran out of things. But we began to move. And wherever we moved, we were an invasive species. We didn't know how it all worked. It was a new, suddenly, wow, there are birds without wings and they're easy to catch. Boom, we started using clubs and spears and we took it. And you can follow a wave of extinction. As we moved across the planet, animals and plants began to go extinct. So that's interesting. Even with simple tools, because of our intelligence, we were a very effective predator. And at some point in these new ecosystems, people had to say, hey, there aren't as many of those plants that we used to use, or there aren't as many animals. So you had two choices. You had to say, okay, we got to move, find something, some more, or we're staying, we got to live differently. And I believe the roots of indigenous cultures around the world are the folks that said, we're staying. And they learned through the hard-won life lessons of their ancestors. So people in the beginning, they screwed up. You know, they killed too many of these, or they took too many of these, or they dammed a little area here. And those were lessons that taught them about how we can live in a more sustainable way. So indigenous knowledge is thousands of years old. Science will never duplicate indigenous knowledge. And the tragedy of our times today is not only the state of the original people of this land, the indigenous people, which is horrifying, but the fact that their knowledge is absolutely critical to us to find how to live in a more sustainable way. So after having been, the government, we've tried to stamp out indigenousness, yet we can learn a great deal from those people. And that's one of the ironies and the tragedies of today. So I spend a lot of time going into Indigenous communities to thank them for retaining their culture and offering my help in whatever I can do to allow them to flourish into the future. Because we need them.
Thank you.
That's kind of exploitative, isn't it? But it's true.
Yeah, that's part of like the prophecy. So like there's been times all through history where we're in like fighting and wars and disease and our environments are really strained, but we can overcome those challenges together. So there's a prophecy, the seventh fire, which we're young people in the seventh fire, and it's either we're gonna come together, so all those colors in Dr. Suzuki's medicine wheel, either we're gonna come together and learn from one another together as a people, or we're not going to, and then the world's going to have the similar effect of not being sustainable or whole or biodiverse, like all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of like that prophecy. So right now, hearing all you guys, like strong leaders, strong voices, those courageous people that are thinking 7 generations ahead, your great, 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 great grandchildren, that's part of that prophecy. So it's interesting to see where we'll go and how you guys are standing up.
I wear this with great pride. It was given to me by an Indigenous person in Australia. But the 4 colors, he told me, were the 4 races: the red people, the yellow, the black, and the white. And the circle is that there is going to come a time when they all come together. And that's got to happen.
I think that's very true. We picture ourselves in bubbles. A lot of us, we just see how things affect us. We see ourselves, we just want more and more and more money, more wealth, just stuff for us, and we don't really think about how we're all connected and how we all have to share this world, and we can't just think about ourselves, especially now more than ever. That's what I think.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Our next eco-hero, we're surrounded here at this table, is Ruth Midgley. Ruth is currently completing a bachelor degree in environmental studies and conservation biology at the University of Toronto. And during her time at UT, Ruth has helped increase awareness of environmental issues among students through her It's Greener Here campaign and the Veggie Mondays program. When I was at UT, they didn't have that. So. Which later received the UT Green Ribbon Award for contributions to sustainability. Ruth is also involved with the Yellowstone Yukon Conservation Initiative, working to protect the ecologically vital Flathead River Valley in BC. This past summer, Ruth worked with Parks Canada in Waterton Lakes National Park as an ecological monitoring technician, collecting field data for conservation purposes. When Ruth manages to spend time indoors, she enjoys cooking, playing squash, and writing fiction. Ruth, what is your question for Dr. Suzuki?
Well, I'm very passionate about environmental issues, as everyone else here is, and I want to learn more about them in order to work towards solutions. But it can be really emotionally taxing when everyone finds this to like immerse yourselves in them day in and day out. How do you deal with working closely with environmental issues every day, and confronted by the arguably bleak reality of our future, and not let it overwhelm you?
Well, I do what you have been fortunate in doing, going to work and experience a place like Waterton, which is a magnificent area. And if you're working on Y2Y, you know there are some fantastic places there. So it is, I think, we've got to get out and look at the places that we're trying to protect and save. And because we need to have those experiences for our psychological and our physical health. We need nature. We need trees. I used to think tree huggers was it was an insult to be called a tree hugger. Now I hug trees because I know we need to physically come in contact with trees. We need nature in ways that we don't even understand now. But you're right, when you get to be a campaigner, as I have for all these years, it can get very, very bleak. But one thing, when Sarika, who is my youngest daughter, and she had her sister Severin as a role model. Severin is 3 years older. There was a time when Sarika was in grade school, and I can't remember something came up at her school, and I said, that's perfect for you and your friends to get involved in, and you can go. And she said, well, why should I buy it? And I said, what? And she said, I hear what you and Mom are saying. It's too late. And that was a shock for me. That was a kick in the head. And I realized that my wife and I would often be, you know, raging on about that damn prime minister or whatever. And to a kid, it's like if Mom and Dad feel they can't do anything, how can we expect to do anything? So that was a very important lesson to me, is first of all, when we're going to rage like that together, don't do it in front of the children. But also is to constantly hold up the hope, telling, you know, taking the children out to experience that wilderness. That's really important. And then that gives you a purpose to fight on. But we're constantly battling that line between despair and hope and hopefulness. For me, the biggest gift I got was one day, you know, I used to come home, sorry, I can't play with you today, I've got to finish this report. And one day I looked in the mirror and I thought, who the hell do you think you are? There are 7 billion people in the world. You're one person. You seem to think you're the one that's going to save the world. I'm just one person. And that lifted this load off my back. And that for all of you who are beginning you're going into your adult lives, don't feel that you're carrying the weight of the planet. We're each one person, and we do the best we can. And that's all we can do. That's all we can do. And so that lifted a huge burden off my shoulders to acquire a bit of humility, I guess. But I think it's important to realize the strength of the changes is going to be through the knowledge there are millions of kids like you. There are millions of kids. And that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, I think what you speak to about needing to recharge in a place that you love is so important. And I've definitely found that for me. And it's funny that I picked U of T as a place to go to school. It's a great school, but it's in the middle of this big city. And but yeah, so I definitely understand that about needing to go into wilderness. And I think that's something that a lot of city people don't ever experience. I think I was really lucky as a kid to be taken out by my mom to these places. And I live in Calgary. I lived right next to the Rocky Mountains, and that was so formative for me. And I wonder if that is something that's really important to press, is encouraging people to get out into the wilderness and to connect in that way.
Absolutely.
Then they'll be more motivated.
Absolutely. But you know, attendance at our national parks is dropping, and you know why? Kids don't want to spend overnight without a Wi-Fi. And I think this is one of the problems, is that you can get so much entertainment or information out of that little cell phone now that who wants to go out? You know, we try to get out once a year on a 10 to 14 day trip where there's no telephones, nothing, like out in the wilderness, and people go, well, how do you last that long, you know, without email? Like, our lives are so different, and it's so important to recharge.
Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah.
I think the Suzuki Foundation program that happens every April or May, the 30 by 30 challenge, is such a great one because it encourages people to, after winter, spend 30 minutes in nature every day for 30 days, rain or shine, cold or not.
You know, when this program, this is every day for 30 days in May. Did you just say that?
Yeah.
Spend half an hour outside each day. And when that proposal came in, I said, what are you talking about? It should be 2 or 3 hours a day at least. And so anyway, I signed up, and I missed 3 days. You know, I was either in Plains or I was in Boston or somewhere, and I thought, holy cow, even for me, you know, who is a big fan of this idea of getting out, it's difficult. And 30 minutes is all we can spare. The average time outside for your generation is 8 minutes a day, and over 6 hours in front of a computer, television, or cell phone monitor. So something's screwed up here.
We can all stay a little bit more grounded if we actually spend time on the ground.
We do.
In contact
we
with
do.
her. Yeah. Now, our next eco-hero is Asha Mayor. At 14 years old, she balances school and homework with working to make the world a better place. When she was just in grade 5, Asha became interested in climate change while working on a school project. She founded a Go Green Club at her elementary school, but Asha soon decided to share her passion and concern for environmental issues with the world. In 2013, she launched a blog, Asha for the World. Since then, her relatable, easy-to-understand articles have been featured in classrooms to help explain environmental issues to children. Asha is also a contributor to the Huffington Post. Good for you.
Thank you.
In the summer of 2015, Asha launched an initiative called Brown Grass Revolution to raise awareness of the importance of water conservation. The objective was to encourage people to stop watering their lawns so much during the summer months. It's a big issue. Asha also enjoys producing short films and videos. One of her recent films, entitled Air Pollution, Toxins in Car Exhaust, was awarded the top overall English video in EduTalk's Video Challenge. Asha, what is your question?
Mr. Suzuki, given all the health and environmental impacts of fracking, how can we encourage the Canadian government to ban hydraulic fracturing in all provinces?
Wow, that's a good question. If I knew that, I'd be on their tail right now. Fracking, for anyone that doesn't know what it is hydraulic fracturing. And it's a technique whereby shale, which has bubbles of gas trapped in the shale, is fractured by drilling down and putting pipes into that shale and drilling under very high pressure, water laced with dozens of chemicals that kind of loosen, kind of soak up the stone so that it liberates the gas. And this is the nuttiest, the craziest, the stupidest way for us to get energy. And it's a very short-lived thing because repeated fracking in the same site gives you less and less. Very quickly you exhaust what's down there. But the issue that I think people don't understand is, one, there's a huge amount of water that's being used. And that water, once it's laced with these chemicals, is basically out of use. It's not drinkable because it's got so much, and it's down into the aquifers. And that's one thing. But the other thing is, these wells are not absolutely tight. And there is a tremendous amount of escape of methane, which is 20 to 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And the governments have bought this notion that gas, natural gas, is a transition fuel. It's not as bad as coal, and therefore we can transform. And that's what Ontario's done by shutting down our coal-burning plants. We've substituted natural gas to fuel the turbines, to boil water. So governments think this is a transition on our way to getting off fossil fuels. But the reality is the carbon footprint of fractured gas is heavier than the carbon footprint of coal. We got to get off fracking. And I think that it just doesn't make any sense. We have to get the people that have lived with fracking in their neighborhood, so that there are many First Nations in northern British Columbia whose territory is just crisscrossed with roads and pipelines and wells because they're fracking all of that area. And it's created enormous health problems and total loss of wildlife, because when you disrupt it that way, wildlife can't just pick their way through the pipelines and so on. So, and in BC, we're using all of this water and losing it. So get people who are being affected directly to start coming out and saying something. In the United States, now there are a number of states that are banning fracking because they've seen what's going on, or they've been the victims, as in Pennsylvania, where one of the consequences is, you've seen it on YouTube, I'm sure, turning on the water tap and lighting it because of all the gas that's with it. So one thing I think we've got to stop doing is stop calling it natural gas, it's frack gas. So our premier in BC has staked her entire political career on getting what they call LNG, liquefied natural gas. And I'm saying it's LFG, it's liquefied frac gas, and it's crazy, crazy way to get our energy.
I know they're proposing that the produced water, as they call it, be shot underground to below the groundwater is what they're proposing, which doesn't make sense at all.
It's out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
And you know, if for a long time we believed that life existed down to bedrock, and then from that point on there was no life.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started drilling down past bedrock, and every time the bits came up, they were contaminated. And they couldn't figure out what the heck's going on. And now they found you can find life up to 7 kilometers underground. These are bacteria, they're like nothing like we know today on Earth. They've been down there, trapped in rock for millions of years. Some of these species divide once every 500 years. So I think of this poor bacteria trapped in, and he's going, I need that little bit of carbon here, and I need that. That's how they live, is down there. But if you calculate, if there are bacteria up to 7 kilometers down, and you go all the way around the planet 7 kilometers down, and suppose there are bacteria trapped all along, then the weight of living, of life, of protoplasm under the ground is greater than the weight of everything about the whales, the trees, everything. There's more weight of protoplasm underground than above ground. And we don't know anything that's good, about their biology. So I was in Princeton giving a lecture, and I saw one of the world's experts on these underground bacteria. And I said to him, the oil industry is proposing to pump carbon dioxide into the ground to store it. This is called carbon capture and storage. I said, what's that going to do to the bacteria underground? He said, I don't know. But he said, the methanogens will love it. I said, what's that? These are bacteria that eat carbon dioxide and produce methane. Methane is 20 to 80 times more potent than green. So that's smart. Send carbon dioxide and get methane out. We don't know enough to do these crazy things, And we talk about carbon capture and storage. That nature did that. The tar sands are carbon captured over millions of years and stored in the ground as tar. Then we're going to burn it and then go, grab the carbon and put it back. What? Nature's already done it. How did you get onto fracking?
Actually, I watched an episode of The Nature of
Good.
And I recently watched Gasland as well.
Yes.
And I found it absolutely appalling. The things that are in fracking fluid, we don't even know what's in there. They won't even tell us what chemicals are in there.
That's right.
And the ones they do tell us are known carcinogens. Mm-hmm. And so that's getting into the groundwater, it's getting into people's wells, and it's causing people to have all of these nerve problems, birth defects. It's a huge problem. There's really nothing logical about it.
You might be the next documentarian on this topic.
I was thinking maybe the next Prime Minister.
Yeah. We'll vote for you, 100%, all of you. Now, Kevin Matthew Wong is the co-founder and artistic director of Broadleaf Theatre at just 22 years old. It's a company that creates theatrical work based on local, national, and global environmental issues. His driving goal is to merge the worlds of theater and environmental activism. He's created work based on the national boil water crisis, speaking of which, the Pickering nuclear plant, and he's collaborated on an environmental mask piece that animated the Greenpeace warehouse. He's currently working on one to tour Broadleaf's theatre work to schools, as well as to create an environmental storytelling week, and finally create a documentary theatre piece on Indigenous activist Vanessa Gray. Now, what is your question, Suzuki?
I guess we'll come into this as a storyteller, as an artist. I'm curious about exactly what you mentioned at the beginning, which was trying to connect these topics to people's everyday lives. And are there topics that you remember that were incredibly difficult to find that connection to? And then how did you work through that to actually get that to an audience? And are there topics now that you're really struggling with to try to think about how do we make people really care and how do we connect that to their everyday lives?
Well, there's some topics that we deliberately stayed away from because technically it was difficult to attach pictures to them. So geology, for example, was a subject we never touched because, and now of course that's been totally changed with computer graphics. You can actually speed up millions of years of time and see mountains move and plates move. And so the graphic animation has really opened that area up. Molecular biology was an area that was very difficult, but now that's becoming more illustrative with computer technology. I think the thing that surprises me is people love anything. I could make a show about the sex life of an oyster, and people would love it. People love it. People love nature. They just love nature. And they're all, when they see things that are surprising, you know, it fills you with delight learning about it, I think. And that's why I love insects. These are the most numerous, the most abundant, the most important groups of animal on the planet. And virtually, you know, every kind of insect is an absolutely amazing story, better than any alien or zombie or any other kind of film, just looking at the life of insects. But they're technically very, very difficult to actually follow the life history. But I think, of course, radio, to me, you can explore everything. And I loved radio. I loved Quirks and Quarks when I started it, because you're using every audience member's brain. They're creating the stories for you. All you have to do is describe it in a way that they can create the story. So, ironically, radio is a much more flexible, exciting medium than television. Television is too tightly wed to pictures.
Yeah. I think the creative restriction there in radio too, how you frame things with the audio that you use as well, and the tone that you take shapes the image too.
Yes.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, I on the topic that you mentioned earlier about Canadians coming from many different places and how do we connect with those Canadians, I was just thinking as we were chatting, a lot of those Canadians are coming from places that are disproportionately affected. I was watching the Golden Rice small documentary or something, and that was really focused on the Philippines, but that's another place that's disproportionately hit by typhoons, and yeah, I guess that's another lesson for everybody, but yeah. I think it's interesting that Canada is this place where all these different people converge that do reflect sort of the places that are affected by these issues, and I think that's a real opportunity for, I guess, all of us to think about these issues. Like, these are countries and places that we can see people are, you know, eat their cuisine on, you know, Queen Street or whatever. I think that's awesome. Like, and how do we, I guess, make these topics for people in this unique sort of country? Yeah.
I haven't given you much of an answer.
There's a lot to think about.
Yeah. But you've raised the diversity issue. When I started my career as a geneticist, I was a grad student in 1958, and we began to use molecular techniques to look at the gene products of single genes. This is really exciting. Take a fruit fly and look at a specific protein coming. And so we began to look at specific genes to see what their molecular structure was. And we expected to find a highly developed organism like a fruit fly. I know you won't believe it's a highly developed, but it's a very highly evolved organism, that the genes would all be very similar, be homogeneous because they've been selected. And to our astonishment, there was a huge amount of diversity. Each gene existed in many different forms. Now we know this is called genetic polymorphism. It's a characteristic of a strong species, is a tremendous amount of genetic diversity. And we have species diversity within ecosystems. Ecosystems with many species are much more resilient and adaptable than ones where you have just a small number of species. And then you have many different ecosystems on the planet. You know, you have Arctic and tropical rainforest. Oh, you have many different. So it's like Russian dolls. You have diversity within diversity at the gene level, at the species level, at the ecosystem level. And humans have added another level, which is culture. Cultural diversity has enabled us to live in many different areas. And we now understand that biology is telling us diversity is the key to resilience and adaptability because the world is constantly changing. And as it changes, you have to be able to call on those combinations that are best suited for the new conditions. And I feel Canada, in a way, is like a big experiment. If you look at the United States, their concept of America is a melting pot. Everybody arrives in America, and you become Americans. You melt together. Whereas Canada, since Trudeau's time, his father's time, was the idea of a cultural mosaic. Now, I personally think that Trudeau did that because he was trying to get the Quebec separatism issue down. And so he wanted to say, yes, we value diversity like Quebec culture, but we are a multi-diverse country, cultural diversity. But I find this a fascinating experiment then. Can we as a country exist with a sense of who we are as Canada and still celebrate diversity within the context of Canada? And I believe that will give us a tremendous amount of resilience if we really listen and pay attention to diverse inputs on different issues. That's why, Indigenous culture is critical for us. But also, this is why women, when Trudeau, the younger one, said gender equity in Canada, to me that was huge because we need the perspective of women being contributing. We need ethnic minorities and religious groups, and all of those make Canada this interesting experiment.
I
Of
think
course, it threatens to pull us apart too.
well, you're kind of a perfect example of why being a good storyteller is also an important part of being an effective environmentalist, because you can share connect all these dots and share all these stories with all of us and everyone watching, and people are engaged and we are connected to it. And so it goes back to your question, how do you effectively communicate with, connect with wider audiences and so on, and the way you seem to be doing it with theater is one way, but I'm sure all of you here are doing it in your own ways as well, getting your story out there and reaching out to Canadians. So, yeah.
For me, one of the advantages is I'm an old man and I've had a lot of experiences to share. That's all. Right?
But just reading their bios, we know they all have very interesting ones too to share. Yeah. Now, our next eco-hero, next generation, is Rachel Parent. Rachel is, at 17 years old, an environmental youth activist, vocal advocate for social justice, youth, health, and animal rights, and responsible consumption. She is the founder of Kids Right to Know, and for the past 5 years has positioned herself as a strong mandatory GMO labeling advocate. At age 14, Rachel kicked some butt on TV, I saw that, debating celebrity host Kevin O'Leary and Amanda Lang on CBC television. So if you guys haven't seen that debate, Google it. Yeah, Rachel Parent and Kevin O'Leary. You gotta see it on GMOs. Now, Rachel is a celebrated international speaker, including TEDx Toronto back in 2014. Also, she is a passionate blogger for the Huffington Post. Two HuffPo people here. Yeah. And guest moderator and youth mentor for the Jane Goodall Institute in Toronto, of Canada, sorry. Rachel, what is your question?
So we're constantly hearing about climate change and the issues that our world is facing and how it affects us all. But my question is, why does the conversation about climate change only focus on reducing industrial carbon output, but it doesn't consider the major contribution from modern industrial farming practices, including chemically intensive, genetically modified crops and greenhouse gas producing confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. Another thing that we're not hearing about is the need to sequester carbon from the atmosphere through regenerative farming practices. I was wondering what your thoughts on that
Well, that's a very, very good question, and I'm sure you've seen the documentary Cowspiracy. Now, I've heard some criticism of some of the numbers on it, but I was blown away by that because as you know, they went to big environmental organizations like Greenpeace and said, why isn't agriculture on the agenda? You're focused on fossil fuel use in transportation and so on. And I was shocked to see these big environmental groups kind of basically going, well, yeah, I know, but not confronting it. Now, I just spent a couple of days in Saskatchewan. I wanted to give Brad Wall a kick in the ass. But I spent one evening. These kids are I spent an evening with the National Farmers Union, of which I'm a member. Very progressive group. They are taking this issue of climate change very seriously. And the whole issue of whether there is sequestration by the practices, they know about that. And I was very excited about that they themselves, I know a lot of people that are growing cattle feel very attacked by it. But they're thinking seriously about the way agriculture has to step up to it. Like one of the big things they have to recognize is that industrial agriculture, which has been hailed as the great salvation, is not the way to go, because industrial agriculture is dependent on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, dependent on big machinery, and I don't think that we continue that, on that route. But I think it goes even further than that. We've now got a government that has made a major commitment at Paris. And they've said we've got to try to restrict temperature rise in this century to below 2 degrees, preferably close to 1.5 degrees. That's a tough target. But once you set a concrete target, that tells you exactly how much more carbon dioxide can be liberated into the air. And so we've got to now look at every way we live. And one of them is our food chain. We can't go on growing food 3,000 to 4,000 miles from where it's grown to where it's eaten. It's got to be transported all that way. That's crazy. So here we have in British Columbia, one of the breadbaskets of the north is the Peace River Valley that's going to be flooded by Site C dam. We don't need the dam at Site C. And that area is priceless as part of the change that's got to happen. We've got to grow our food where we eat it. And that's a part of it. But that means we've really got to look at everything in the way that we live. And that hasn't been done enough in agriculture.
I agree. And I actually went to the Monsanto shareholder meeting in January, and I was able to talk to the CEO of Monsanto.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
did he know who you were?
yeah. Let's just say I got some unfriendly looks from him and the shareholders. But what he was saying was that we need to plant GMO soy all over the world to sequester more carbon into our soil.
Yeah.
What he wasn't mentioning is that GMO soy is being planted heavily in our Amazon areas and contributing to deforestation as well as animal agriculture. So these are big issues that we face, and even them going to Paris, Monsanto was at the climate change meetings.
Of course.
And it just shows you how much infiltration they have even within organizations and institutions. So these are the things that we're fighting to try and make sure that we can have real healthy food that's affordable for all in every area.
I think that, this is at the heart of the problem today, that if you look at governments around the world, what they're doing is serving a corporate agenda. When they sign NAFTA or free trade agreement or any of these international agreements, what they do is to open things up for the corporations.
Exactly.
And we've got to confront the fact that corporations don't care about your future. Their job is to make money, period. And we know from the history of the tobacco industry, they knew for decades smoking kills. And yet they had a campaign to tell people the evidence isn't in, it's not true. And the oil industry has taken them. Many of the same people that were campaigning for the tobacco industry are now campaigning for the anti-global climate change group. So I think we've got to confront the fact that it's the corporate agenda that is really a major problem.
Yeah, and we're facing new trade laws now, such as CETA and the TTP, and these will have incredible impacts on Canada, Europe, the US. The DARK Act in the US was just approved, so now we won't have GMO labeling in the US unless that gets overturned. So these are the things as society that we are trying to have to push against corporations, and I'm sure we've all faced adversity in the work that we do. Because as activists, that's what we do, but we have to keep pushing forward because after all, it's our opportunity to make the world a better place for future generations.
It comes right down to it, right here now, with the issue of Nestle buying the rights to water. And the reality is NAFTA will prevent the government of Ontario or Canada from doing anything about that.
Yeah.
So,
So
then you can say if Donald Trump gets in, he'll cancel NAFTA. Are we supposed to?
Are you voting for Trump? Is that He's going to start campaigning for Trump now. Surprise twist. Have any of you had challenges in going up against, whether it's a corporation or a school, and get any advice for each other on tackling that? Or sometimes it just feels so big that you don't think you're going to make a difference.
We get videos and articles made about me all the time saying that I'm a corporate shill and that I make money off of the work that I do. And this happens all the time. You can find them. But in reality, I mean, this is something that I'm doing out of my own passion. And, even my family is getting attacked for the work that I do. And I think it's something that as activists we all face at some time. But my advice to anybody is take one day at a time and realize that no matter what anybody ever says, as long as you know what you're doing is right, that's all that matters. To keep pushing forward and persevering, because it's not just about us or the next generation, but all the generations yet to come, all the potential that our world has to become the most beautiful place it possibly can be.
But I think you pointed out a very important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and Dad are very, very crucial, and I'm sure Craig Kielberger would agree.
Mm-hmm.
I know that my daughter would agree that parents backing up, children, what you all have done is blowing me away. But I know that your parents were also critical parts of supporting you and all those other things. So,
Well, I'm curious to know whether you all grew up in very green households, or whether, like me, your parents weren't super into it when you were young. Yeah. Did you put up your hand if you weren't in a very environmentally supportive household to begin with? Yeah. Did you convince your parents?
Yeah, my parents, well, they had me a few years after they came here, but I guess back then it wasn't as big of a deal. But after I started getting involved in it now, and my sister she's in grade 6 right now, she's been learning more about it at school, and so there's much more of a push to reduce the amount of waste we produce in a household and to recycle more. And I think my parents are much more conscious about that now, so that's awesome.
Good job. And you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I don't know if, when I was working in marketing on some environmental issues, there was this thing called Food Belt. We were trying to protect lands north of this street called Major Mackenzie. And I think it's interesting. It's an interesting combination of those diversity questions that we were thinking about. Markham's there's a lot of Chinese Canadians in Markham. And my parents, both of them came from scarcity when we grew up in Hong Kong and China. And so for them, meat, for example, is a status symbol, and it's very hard to detach that as a cultural thing away from the environmental impacts. There is a difference, I think, in the next generation of Canadians. But yeah, that's something that I struggle with for sure, in trying to convince the communities that are culturally specific to buy into these things, especially when they come from a world that they perceive as really scarce, and suddenly we're given the illusion, especially as Canadians, that this country is endless. So yeah, I think it is sort of hard, but they started bringing containers to if we go to lunch as family and stuff like that. So I don't know, small things. Right?
but shark fin soup, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Weddings.
That was the same thing. That was a big thing years ago. Yeah. So all of those things. Yeah, and it's who are the people within those communities that can speak to those communities, and even if you are, how do you do it? Because sometimes you won't get the most.
What do your parents think about your green thing?
Yeah, I think they're a little surprised by it. For the Food Belt stuff, they would drive me to the meeting and then leave, and then come back to pick me up afterwards. Some of the deputations would go from 7 to midnight. But they're more and more on board, I think. I don't know. I think that they're my family. I think that the whole idea of family supporting that thing is important.
So if you have parents that aren't particularly supportive, don't give up hope out there.
Yeah.
Now our next eco-hero is Amanda Harvey Sanchez. Amanda grew up hearing about climate change from her parents, actually, on the other flip side. She has been involved in environmental initiatives from a young age, but it wasn't until joining her campus fossil fuel divestment campaign in 2014 that she learned to approach climate activism from a social justice perspective. Working on divestment, she has had the opportunity to engage with related social issues, including Indigenous rights, anti-racism, and feminist activism. Amanda, who's just 20 years old, by the way, spent last summer working for 350.org on the People's Climate Plan, a national campaign to engage people in the federal climate town halls and demand ambitious climate action in the government's forthcoming national climate strategy. Amanda is currently working with youth across Canada on Climate 101, a civil disobedience action that's going to be taking place October 24th to call on Trudeau to reject Kinder Morgan pipeline. Amanda, what's your question for Dr. Suzuki?
Thank you. My question actually relates to the last thing you mentioned, that this action, Climate 101, and the idea of civil disobedience. So I feel like in our childhood and adolescence, and really throughout our whole lives, young people are encouraged to follow the rules, and that's a very difficult norm to break. And not only are we encouraged to follow the rules, we're also praised for successes that are within the system. And I think a lot of us have been talking about problems with the dominant capitalist, colonial, often patriarchal system. But civil disobedience is one tactic that breaks rules and also challenges systems. So how would you encourage you to approach civil disobedience, and what advice would you give young people?
Well, I don't have any advice. I've never been arrested. And the problem was I was really blackmailed by the nature of things. I was many years ago to go to the line and get arrested when the Haida were blockading logging in Haida Gwaii, the Queen Charlotte Islands. And I was told by CBC that if I was arrested, they would pull me off the nature of things, and which was not a big, for me, not tragic, but they said we'd probably cancel the series. And the series has been going long before I got involved with it, and that would be a big deal. So for me, that kept me back from getting arrested. Now, what actually happened is my father said, well, I got your name, you're my son, I'll go and get arrested. So he went to get arrested. Yeah. Fortunately, there were some 80 some odd Haida were arrested. They didn't need him. So, but he was there. But I felt very, very frustrated at not being able to go to the line. My grandson, I don't know if you know, Tom Campos, was arrested, and then he, because of his arrest, his mother and his sister both went to the line over Kinder Morgan, the pipeline in Vancouver. I think that young people see their planet threatened, their future threatened, and they're willing to go to the line, and I applaud it and support it. I think that the ideal thing would be for young people to partner with elders who are retired. Because young people have everything at stake. It's your futures. Elders are already through the system. They don't owe anything to anybody. They're free to do something, and I think elders should be putting their bodies on the line along with young people.
Thank you. That's really good.
Any of you been on the front lines already? I would recommend it. It's funny, dude, because I grew up in a family where, because my father's family had left Russia and been persecuted and shot. I was very much raised in a family where they're like, please don't go to protests. Please don't, you're going to get arrested. You're going to get the whole family investigated, because they actually had investigated my family and showed up on my grandmother's neighbor's doors knocking to see who we were. And it was very stressful going to protests when your family's sitting there going, oh, you could end up in jail, don't do it, you know. So,
Yes.
And I understand the family pressures, the families that don't want you to end up in jail.
What I'm saying now, I'm sure parents are just going to
They're not going to But what Amanda's saying is civil disobedience that's peaceful. You're not recommending violent action. So it's a totally different story.
Yeah. But I remember when we won the battle over Haida Gwaii, and I was this is years later, I was jogging in Sandsmith, which is a logging community. And a guy came up in a truck and he saw me and he recognized me. So I thought he slowed down. I thought he was going to talk to me. And when I caught up to him, he just heaved the truck and ran me right into the ditch. And, there are many of my friends in the forest battles that we've had have been beaten up. And, these are very real tensions. And just protesting, not civil disobedience, just protesting many times and you were at risk, without question.
I definitely feel like the tension too, if your parents are from like another country, like my mom is from Mexico, and when I told her that I was going to be involved in this action, she was like not on board at first. And I think it kind of reminds me though that we're in a very privileged situation in Canada where we actually are able to protest. In a lot of countries, people are killed for just protecting the land. So I think if you're able to, and I think personally I am able to, I want to use the privilege I have to shed light on the work that's already being done by Indigenous communities and other communities around the world, and use my ability the best way I can.
And of course, there are also lots of family-friendly protests, as Rachel knows, because she's organized some of those, so you don't have to worry about being arrested there. Unless Monsanto has an in with the police. So now, our last eco-hero is Ryan Storm. Ryan calls himself chief eater and food enthusiast on his blog, riseratings.com. He lives in Toronto with his family, claims to have good taste, no pun intended, and in his quest to eat healthy, organic, and local foods, and to review restaurants that do, he reviews and shares all that he deems good. Ryan started his food reviewing restaurants in 2008, his blog reviewing restaurants in 2008, when he was just 8 years old. He might have been the youngest food critic. Now, he still reviews restaurants. He also shares his favorite products. I know you will tell chefs when they're like, you should not be using Heinz ketchup on the table, that kind of thing. And he reviews his favorite products, chefs, food events, and even farmers markets, mostly in Toronto, but includes his travels as well. He has created and delivered a food literacy game for young children and kindergarten classes, and has written 2 books as school projects and plans on creating more. You got 52 to catch up to, so we're waiting for Ryan. Ryan expresses how fortunate he feels to be receiving lots of support from chefs and other bloggers who remind him of his responsibility to be positive and to try to have his work make a difference and make people feel connected to their food choices. He enjoys public speaking and has had the great opportunity to present to various groups of kids and adults over the years. Part of taste is feeling good about what you eat, is the message that Ryan shares most frequently. Ryan, what is your question?
Yeah, so we've talked about throughout this whole roundtable about how kids are the future, and we need to learn what we can do. So my question is, if you could teach high school students one thing, whether it be about saving the environment or the food, whatever, if you could teach them one thing, what would it be?
Well, I think there are lots of things that we can do in our daily lives. There are books and books written about things you can do, 10 ways to save the planet, all this kind of stuff. So there's no lack of individual things that you can do in big or small ways to change your footprint. But to me, one of the things that's most striking about our entire conversation, which I can tell you has electrified me, thank you all. Thank you all for being who you are. I'm so inspired by all of you. But the one thing that we really have left out is politics. We live in a country that aspires to be a democracy. That's why you can do it without your mom worrying about what might happen in Mexico. But you don't vote. And the reality is that any politician, once elected, their highest priority is getting reelected. And so you're not on the agenda. And so I think that the most important thing is that you've got to get involved, and that means you have to recruit 2 equal warriors on your behalf. Mom and Dad have to be looking out for your future. And, I meet some young people who say, well, my dad's in business and he just thinks what I'm doing is crazy. And I go, if you can't convince your father that this is an issue, how the hell are you going to be able to convince anybody else? Mom and dad have to be eco-warriors on your behalf. And what does that mean? They have to get involved in the political process, whether it's writing a letter to the Globe and Mail or the Star, whether it's phoning in to talk shows, whether it's going to meetings in which politicians appear. I've decided that one of the things my foundation has got to do is drive climate into every election as a high priority. And the way you do that is you call on your supporters across the province, and you just say, you've got to be making this, saying it don't let any politician appear, whether on the left, right, or wherever, don't let any politician appear without someone saying, well, what are you doing about climate? Because I can guarantee you, if politicians start reporting back to their headquarters, geez, every time I speak, people are telling me they're worried about climate. It becomes an issue. If people don't raise it, it's not an issue. Your future is not an issue. And so my advice is to say we live in a democracy. And that democratic system right now is not reflecting a concern for me.
Yeah, well, also I realize that every little thing that we do has a huge impact, and even though we're only one person in a world of 7 billion people who doesn't even have a say, like a couple years ago, the Canadian Sugar Institute came to my school to give a presentation on the health benefits of sugar. And so I heard about this, and I was like, okay, how can this even be possible? So I went when they were giving the presentation.
This guy didn't know what he was walking into.
And I asked them a few questions, given all the evidence that's been brought up in recent years, how can you say that sugar is healthy? And one thing led to another, and they ended up telling me that I was being too invasive into their privacy, and that I should stop asking the questions.
Wow!
So I wrote a blog post about it later that day, and it got reposted by another blogger in Ottawa, and it ended with the Canadian Sugar Institute writing an email to my mom and the blogger in Ottawa saying that I was lying.
Wow.
And so, and I realized, these people are so, and they ended up changing their whole Twitter handle and everything, because, I realized even, me just asking questions and posting on my blog, I had an impact on this huge Canadian Sugar Institute, that really made me realize that I can actually make a difference in the world. And, I think every kid needs to realize that they can do things to help, no matter how small they may be.
Right. So in addition to recruiting mom and dad, the important thing is to spread your perception, all of your perception, among your peer group. Because if, other kids are worried about fashion or whatever, we've got to start focusing, which allows me to get on my pet peeve with young people. Walking around with blue jeans that they may have paid up to, mom and dad may have paid up to $300 for, already ripped to shreds. What the heck is going on? I find it disgusting that we live in a society that is so wealthy and so concerned for fashion that we will buy pre-ripped clothing. I just want to this is crazy.
I don't see any here today, so we're good. That is all the time we have for today.
We've gone on a long time.
I want to thank you, David, for fielding these wonderful questions.
Thank me. I thank you.
And for sharing your experiences, your advice, your wisdom. Our hope is that you've inspired each other as well, and those watching online to just feel more inspired and motivated and know that you can change the world. I know I certainly do. And you guys fill us all up. Refuel our tank. Isn't it wonderful?
Thank you all.
The Planet Focus Film Festival launches tonight, by the way, with a special sold-out event, an evening with David Suzuki, where he will be accepting the 2016 Canadian Eco Hero Award and giving a keynote address in front of a live audience in Toronto. Now, Planet Focus, by the way, runs until Sunday this week, so for information about seeing films, panels, and other special events, please visit the website. That's planetinfocus.org. We want to thank you all for being here today.
Do they all have seats
all of
today?
you. We'll hope so.
Yes.
We'll get them in. We'll get them in. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you everyone at home and at school watching. Please go out into your day and carry this inspiration forward and use it to kick butt out there and help us change the planet. Thank you.
You guys are really inspirational.
That's one of the big issues.